Today, our guest on the Dream Big Series podcast is Kevin Rankin. Kevin tours the world with the 80s group of Flock of Seagulls, performing for thousands of fans at every show. Kevin is the kind of bright light that leaves a lasting impression from the first time you meet him. I originally met Kevin when our agency booked the Flock of Seagulls for a concert last summer here at Town Center in Leawood. Kevin's flight didn't leave until later that following day, so by the time he left, I had a new friend and am grateful for the time that I had with him. He talks about the power of staying clean for longevity, as well as the attitude of loving people and treating them the way he wanted to be treated, and how that has continued to propel his career upward. I experienced the love his friends and family have for him when I posted on social media asking for questions for the interview. I hope you enjoy this interview, but more importantly, I hope you get a lot out of it. There is just so much meat in here that Kevin has that will help any artist have a long-lasting and fulfilling music career. This is Chad Borkwin, and this is the Dream Big Series. I am a professional musician and recording artist that has been fortunate enough to learn how to get paid doing what I love. But this didn't just happen for me. In fact, I have years of doing things other than music that have all played a part of the success I get to experience now. But more importantly, I've learned the value of having the right people speak into my life and how that is the key to breaking free of old limiting habits. So if you're tired of being stuck and you believe there is more for you in life, the good news is everything I've done is a result of what I've learned, and it can be taught. Join us as we bring topics and guests onto this show to provide you with valuable insights on how to get to your big dream. This is the Dream Big Series. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome to the Dream Big Series show. And today we have Kevin Rankin from the Flock of Seagulls. And
Nice.
buddy, I am so excited to do this because, when you were in town last summer, your flight didn't leave till later the evening the next day, I guess it was. And
Right.
we got to hang out and man, I came out of that whole deal with a new friend.
Yeah, it was
so much
fun.
fun. So where are you at now, Kevin?
I'm at home in Oregon City, Oregon, just south of Portland.
Fantastic. And you have
Yeah,
a show tonight, right?
I do have a show tonight. Yeah, not with the Flock of Seagulls. I'm playing with a Bon Jovi tribute band tonight. So
Oh my gosh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
moneymaker.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, let's get people up to speed a little bit here. How did you get from starting out on drums to playing with the Flock of Seagulls? Maybe if you could just kind of take us through that journey a bit, that'd be amazing.
Sure, you bet. Well, Chad, you've been in the business for a while, so you know how networking is so incredibly important. And for me, this is one of those situations that it was a matter of connecting from one band to the next. I played with Animotion, the 80s band, for about 15 years. I started with them in 2002. And a lot of the shows that we do with those 80s bands, we do package shows, right? So bands like Berlin and Wang Chung and Naked Eyes, all those bands from the era, we all played shows together. Flock of Seagulls is one of the bands that we we did a lot of shows with and just became friends with them over the years. They were guys that were on the same bill that endured a lot of the same sort of shenanigans behind the scenes and some of the trials and tribulations of doing some of that touring. And so we kind of grew together. And Mike Score, the singer, and I got to know each other fairly well. The rest of the band members and I became friends. So in 2016, when their drummer, who was a buddy of mine, burned his hands really bad, they needed to get a sub. And they asked if I could do a cruise to the Bahamas. And I said, well, yeah, twist my arm. That'd be tough, right? It's February. I live in Portland, Oregon, where it's just rainy all the time in the winter. So Bahamas sounded great. I did one warm-up show in Vegas, and then we did an 80s cruise with like Huey Lewis and the News and Richard Marx and a bunch of artists like that. Cool in the Gang. It was just a lot of fun, and we just hit it off. And the drummer, it took a while for the drummer to come back, so we did a handful of other shows. When he did come back, he just decided it was just time to not be on the road anymore. And so he put in his notice. They gave me a shout. It was a natural progression to just rock right in. And I had no idea that we'd be playing as much as we have been. It's remarkable. I'm playing more right now than I ever have in my life. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Well, let's take that back a little further, all right? So
Yeah,
Animotion, because that was a big gig too,
it was.
so
Yeah.
what, you know, just back, further back, you didn't obviously start playing drums and start playing for them. So what,
Yeah.
how did you get your start playing drums and how did that go?
Okay. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. Yeah. So I grew up in Montana. I was out in the woods in a log cabin. And I had a grandfather, I mean, sorry, an uncle, my mom's brother-in-law, that was a jazz drummer in Chicago, prominent jazz drummer, amazing drummer. And as a teenager, I started off playing clarinet in the shadow of my dad, who was a Dixieland jazz clarinetist and saxophonist. And I realized as a teenager that it was a lot harder to pick up girls playing clarinet than drums. So yeah, that's part of the situation. I mean, I saw my uncle playing, and I was really inspired by his drumming. Then the '80s MTV era came out, and admittedly, the first time I saw a Motley Crue video, saw Tommy Lee, the bombastic, just energy that came at playing drums was something that just, yeah, it caught me. So I started playing drums in high school, and we lived in the woods. We lived about a mile away from the nearest neighbor, so uh, I had a lot of isolation.
Yeah.
My parents let me go out and put my drums outside. It was really cool. I'd bring my stereo out and just slam on the drums with Kiss records, just echoing up the canyon walls and those dreams, of hitting the big stages and playing with the big artists. And so this sort of aspiration to go to LA was the big thing, right? Everybody in Montana wanted to get up and go to the Sunset Strip and the Musicians Institute there. Two of my best friends went to Musicians Institute the day after we graduated high school. And I was so resentful. I wanted to stick around. I wanted to go to LA, and my parents encouraged me to stick around. And I think I heard on one of your podcasts that it wasn't a backup plan; it was a support plan.
Nice,
Is that
yeah.
right?
Right, yeah.
So that's kind of what my parents encouraged, was to make sure that I got a degree in something to help sustain my music career, just in case I didn't get to be so self-sustaining. And so I stuck around, went to college at Montana State University. I took sociology as my major and made music studio teaching option minor so that I could get a little bit of studio experience, get my theory under my belt, and played in a lot of cover bands there. Played everything: jazz, funk, fusion. Was in a reggae band that toured around the summer times. And while I did that, I had a full-time job as a youth counselor in this residential shelter. So I was putting in hours. Man, I was finishing college, playing music at least 3 nights a week. And I put in the time, not only to practice and play gigs, but I was willing to work these crazy hours because, I just wanted to get as much time on stage as I could. At that point, it wasn't about playing the huge stages in Montana. It was about fortifying my skills so that I could go to Los Angeles, right, and be a big rock star. So all my buddies that went to LA promptly left the business. I think they made it 2 or 3 years. Not one of those guys is still playing music, unfortunately. For me, I stuck around through college, and some college. I was in the concert committee at the college, so we brought in some bands and the national touring bands, and I would work doing setup and staging and spotlight and that kind of thing for bands that would come in. A lot of the hair bands, like Poison and Warrant and Trickster, Firehouse, those bands of the day. And then we we had this band that was just signing a deal with Sony. When we picked them up, my friend that was running the concert committee booked them as Mookie Blaylock, and then they got their deal, changed the name to Pearl Jam. And so by the time they came in, they really weren't well known. Their first video just started taking off, and they had one guy as a tech, and he didn't really know how to set up drums. He was kind of like the all hand stage guy. And so when he brought the drum kit in, set it up, it hadn't been tuned at all. And so I was always gravitating towards drum kits, and so I ran over and tuned the guy's drum kit up, and the tech caught me, and he's like, "Hey man, don't mess with this kit." And of course, Dave Aberzees, the drummer, walks in and he goes, "Hey man, this drums sound great." And so he outed me, and he introduced me to Dave. And from that point, from sound check on, we hung all day and night. I stood with him, and during the show, he'd turn back and kind of joke with me. And after the show, we hung out for a few hours, and I was asking him about parts that he was playing. So he charted out some parts for me, and then he was heading off to Europe right away. And so he wrote me a letter from Europe. We stayed in touch. He wrote me this letter, and I still have this letter talking about the arrangements and the parts, and how it was really cool just to be really treated as a social sort of drummer buddy, and not somebody that was like this band that was just starting to take off. And he invited me and my fiance at that point to come out and stay with him in Seattle when he came back from tour. And at that point, I realized, wow, it wasn't like it was a ladder to elevate a status or anything like that. I realized how attainable that sort of thing was, the sort of a next level, that this guy could be down to earth and really social and still cool, but engaged with people that come to the show. And I was floored. I mean, the energy and the music just, blew my mind. But the fact that this guy was so cool just made me realize that this is something that I can really go after and be me, and hopefully, get to those points and status that I want to. I had also met Dave Weckl just right around that same time. My dad was the jazz and Dixieland guy, so he took me to see Chick Corea. I was 17, and I was such a hairband rocker, right? So I saw Chick Corea play, and I was floored by this incredible fusion trio. And it just blew my mind. So much so that I just ran backstage. I ran in through the theater and went over to talk to Dave. I just said, man, I didn't even know that kind of stuff was possible to play. And he talked to me for a little while. Chick Corea and John Patitucci were backstage, and you could tell they were kind of bothered by this long-haired mullet guy, like talking about drums. So he said, just come back to the hotel and hang in the lounge. So my dad drove me over to the hotel, and Dave and I sat for like 2 or 3 hours in this hotel lounge talking about drum and music career. And he too had written me this letter that talked about electronic recording and using drums, and a lot of it wasn't necessarily to do with drumming and perfecting your craft or anything like that. He was asking me then, do you party? And like I said, I was 17. And I was such a straight-laced kid. I had, alcoholism in the family, so I really avoided alcohol. I played in some bands. I saw what drugs did to the guys in the band. So I was as straight as it came. I told him, no, I don't party. He said, if you really want to do this for a career, you have to be able to shut that stuff down early on. He said, at that point, he was in his 30s, I think, and he said, there's no way I could still be doing this right now if I maintain, coke and booze and all the late night partying that I was doing, and that everybody was doing at that point. And it hit me, it hit me that he was so open about it, and that he even had enough sort of interest in a young kid to be able to share that kind of stuff. And so he wrote me this letter. I still have that letter, talking a little bit about that stuff, and then just about what it would take to pursue going after this thing for a career. So I had sort of this fortification of guys that were aspiring, that really took the time to sit with me and talk to me about how important it was to have sort of a strong moral code and being true to yourself, And so I was inspired. Chased some friends out to Portland, Oregon, and Dave Aberzees, that drummer from Pearl Jam, had contacts out here too. When my fiance and I we went out to stay with him for about a week in Seattle. He took us everywhere and introduced us to everybody. And as far as networking goes, it was never intended to be a networking sort of thing. It just happened. And part of it was being able to be all right with the hang, showing up and not being annoying and being intimidated by some of the heavyweights that we were hanging out with. And so when I came to Portland, I was really hoping to be able to connect with Dave and have that be sort of a parallel. Portland and Seattle, they're a few hours away from each other. I bounced back and forth to Seattle all the time. And I was devastated that almost, I mean, really within maybe a month of me moving out, he was fired from the band. And we had spent some time together with the rest of Pearl Jam. I'd seen how he was treated in the band, and it really bothered me because he was the guy that was so social and so generous in his time, and he was gregarious, talking to everybody, shaking hands, and he was sincere. It wasn't that he was like this phony, sort of guy, but it was almost used as a crutch against him that he was so social. There's an angst to that band, and they treated him shitty. And because he was such a good guy, and I knew that, of course, every band goes through turmoil. I'm sure that there was a lot to it, but from what I saw, the way that he was treated, a lot of times he was sort of pigeonholed for being this real social and gregarious guy. And that bothered me because I'm the kind of guy that I like to make friends with everybody. I just love people. And it bothered me that this guy that could really help the brand of Pearl Jam by showing people that, hey, this is a real sincere, really, really good guy that didn't have any agenda. He was just out spreading positivity, got axed. And so that was one of those early sort of experiences that I had in the music business, that I saw that you could be at the top of the game, and it could be taken away without a moment's notice. And so I had moved out with some friends from Montana in an original band, put together a record in Montana that we were trying to shop around, and we were waiting for my bass player to show up. And in that meantime, I met this band that floored me, a trio. The girl that was singing was also this incredible bassist, and they needed a drummer to sub for a gig, and it turned into me taking the gig on full time. And over almost 5 years, we played the whole Northwest a lot. The band was called On Alama, kind of a goofy name. But this singer, she's an incredible songwriter and a real unique voice. She was early on, she was into funk popping and slapping, and but the band evolved into something that kind of had, it was during that Lilith Fair era, the post-grunge sort of Lilith Fair era, where female singer-songwriters were coming out, but she had a real growly voice. The songs were edgy and driven, but there was some interest in labels, and we showcased, and we were signing a deal with RCA, and it was just, there was some conflict during that time, so it was time for me to go. I left right at the onset of this label signing. Band went on and got shelved, and nothing really ever happened. And unfortunately, that singer, she just didn't take it well. Eventually, just kind of had a breakdown. She doesn't play music anymore, and it was hard to see. During the height of that band, the singer from Animotion had seen me play. He lived in Portland, and apparently he had seen me play. And he was putting Animotion together for one reunion gig in 2001, I think. And he called two of my buddies and me just to see if he could get this drummer to go down to California to do this one show. I was the first one to return the phone call. And thankfully, what turned into this one-off gig developed into this incredible friendship and family that I had with Phil and the band. Bill Wadhams is the singer. He'd been living in Portland for a while, and the rest of the band was in California, and they all had different things going on. The guitarist has been with Rod Stewart for 20 some odd years. The keyboardist had been with Jose Feliciano for a long time, but he was also this incredible session guy. And so he had done keyboards for the Thriller album, the Michael Jackson Thriller album. So that's him on Billie Jean. And the bass player was married to the girl singer in the band. So Animotion had two lead singers, right? They had a woman and a man, and they lived in Fresno. So we were going to do this one gig in Fresno. It was kind of like a one-off reunion gig. And I was the only guy that wasn't the original member. We did the one show, and Don, the guitarist, said, "This is way too fun. We have to do more of this." And that turned into 15 years of touring and playing with all these 80s bands that I grew up loving, from a lot of these bands I was such a fan of early on. Like Missing Persons was one of my favorite bands that had this pop sensibility, but they also had real, they had kind of a progressive edge to them, right? Terry Bozzio, the drummer, was and just remarkable drummer. I got a Missing Persons shirt on right now, as a matter of fact. A lot of these bands I was such a fan of, and then all of a sudden we're touring with them, and so rather than sort of holding them in this regard of being this teenage fan, they're my contemporaries. We're playing on all the same shows, and they became those real friends that I developed with Dave, and it just made it that connection a lot closer. Realizing that they too have real life issues that go on, families and tax issues, and like sometimes day jobs that interfere, and so that pairing you mentioned, Animotion. We did many years. There was a new record that was coming out, and when I got the invitation to join the Flock of Seagulls, when I was subbing, I was playing with both bands, and I tried to balance and do both gigs. Sometimes we were on the same bill, sometimes we weren't, and it really made a lot more sense for me to just kind of choose one. And our singer from the Flock of Seagulls asked me, "Hey, I really can't have you playing, in multiple bands in the same lineup. It cheapens the brand. Right. It makes it like, I've got a bunch of hired guys," and he's absolutely right. It made sense. And truthfully, it worked out so well because Animotion ended up finding their original drummer from 35 years ago. So we just transitioned right from me jumping to a Flock of Seagulls, and Jim Blair came in to play drums for Animotion again. And a lot of times we're still touring on the same lineup for all these tours. And I still get to see my family, my friends, my family in Animotion, and Flock still gets to do those gigs together. So it's a win-win.
The music industry is drastically changing, and for the better. The power to have a successful music career is in your hands and no longer up to a few gatekeepers. The key is having the right information, the right tools, and committing to do the work. I want to help you jumpstart your career with my free ebook called Play Music, Make More. This free ebook is everything we've done with our own group, as well as what I've learned being an entertainment agent, and it's all played into the success we've had as independent artists. Visit playmusicmakemore.com to get your free copy today.
So yeah, there was a ton in there, man, of just things that to pull out of there. I mean, one of the things that I heard was really, really cool that you talked about was you were the first one to call back. Yeah. That's, with this booking agency I have sometimes, I can't tell you how many times people take forever to return calls.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is their livelihood we're talking about.
Yeah.
And sometimes that call is the opportunity of a lifetime or going to lead to the opportunity of a lifetime.
Right.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, one thing that people don't oftentimes realize is where those paths lead. You just mentioned that. It's a really important thing. A prominent friend of mine, he plays in a big national act, and he just through a friend, got referred to this project where the biggest producer in the world heard his stuff, liked what he heard, wanted to produce this record. I'm not at liberty to divulge who it is, but when he talked about saying, we'll see where that record goes. We'll see how well it does. And I told him, you realize that it doesn't even matter how well that record does. Now that you're on this guy's radar, every time he needs a ringer to come in, you're the guy. And this guy's as big a producer as you can possibly get it. And so he's already playing in a really, really big situation. But there's always another opportunity, right? That friend of mine in particular had been sort of typecast for a long time because he'd been known as like this metal drummer that couldn't, in like the industry's eyes, he was sort of typecast as the only guy that, he's the double bass guy. We don't need him for the Avril Lavigne audition. And that's one particular case. He was getting a call to audition for Avril, and walking in, they already had sort of pigeonholed him, and so they were going to write him off even before he walked in. And I told him, it would be so great for you to get one of those amazing pop opportunities where they can see your diversity. And the networking and the connection, the paths that lead there are so important. And I don't mean to go off on a tangent about this, but I have a 20-year-old son who's a drummer, and he's an amazing drummer, and he's gotten into the hip hop world the last couple of years, where he's been producing his own rap and hip hop records. And I've told him early on, he got to this point where he was a phenomenal drummer, and I said, "You've got all the facilities to be a successful recording drummer. The things that you really need to work on now are the hang. People, you want to be the guy that can be around somebody 24 hours a day, and on a bus when it's uncomfortable and you haven't eaten well and nobody gets any sleep, and you're still personable, and somebody can know that you can be reliable and dependable and have a decent attitude." That leads everywhere in the business, right? Because really the technical aspects are not even 50%, I don't think. I think really the communication and the hang and the reliability and the energy and the attitude you bring, so much more important, because there are a million amazing players out there that can outplay you, but a lot of those guys are assholes, unfortunately.
Well, man, and you don't just say that, you live that. I mean, you walked, so, we're getting ready for you guys to sound check before I've ever met you. And when you show up, it's like a light bulb walks on stage, and so you're not just easy to get along with. You're the guy that is so bright that nobody's ever going to forget you. And I don't know, well, and it's funny because we asked for some questions.
Yeah.
And then one guy here is Andrew, is it Crowwater? Crowwater, you know him?
Andrew Cloudwater, yeah.
Yeah. He asked who gives the best hugs of Flock of Seagulls. Obviously it's a ringer question. We already know the answer, but have you always been that way, or did you develop that?
Yeah, I mean, really, since I was a shy young kid, I remember my mom just talking about how important it was to lead with a smile, and so if you kill them with kindness early on, chances are you can kind of break down any kind of wall that somebody might have. Your communication with somebody is going to be a lot better because you disarm them with a smile, right, and with personality. And I have a web design business as well that I run from the road. And there's like a slogan that I loved. There was a speech that Jim Carrey gave as a commencement speech years ago to a graduating class. And at the end of the speech, right, and one of his closing statements was, "The effect you have on others is the greatest form of currency there is." And I believe in that so wholeheartedly, that you want people to understand how important they are to you when you're talking to them. When I go out and I think about how Dave Weckl made me feel like in backstage, and he wanted me to come back and talk to him after the show. This dude he's in his 30s. I'm a 17-year-old punk kid with a mullet and talking about Motley Crue, right? And he still had enough genuine interest in maybe the future of an up-and-coming drummer to sit and talk to me for hours, right, about the important parts. And he had no agenda. There was no ulterior motive. This guy wasn't going to hook up. He wasn't going to, get anything out of it. He just took the time in Helena, Montana, to sit down with this guy and share some of his knowledge. And it was a life-changing experience for me, right? It's man, I mean, over 30 years later, I can still remember every part of it. The same thing with Dave Abbruzzese, Yeah. I'm sure he was a great drummer and one of the biggest bands in the world. To me, it didn't matter, right? This guy was so genuine and so sincere, and made me feel so good that I just wanted to be around him, right? And I knew how it made me feel, and I thought, it's beyond me saying, I want to be on that stage, playing those songs in front of all those people. I really want to have that kind of connection with people. I know that music is such an important thing it transcends any kind of physical thing, right? It makes people feel emotional and spiritually driven and everything else. I love that part of music. To me, it's so important. And so if you know that you can have that kind of connection with somebody and have music be the catalyst for that, it's so so valuable to me, and so that's what I want. And it's really important for me to have that, like with my band, when whenever we're on the road and there's this sense of camaraderie where you feel like it's you guys against the world. There's nothing better, right? It's like a perfectly honed relationship. Um, if you've got a relationship with a partner, your fiance, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and you guys are on the same page and you're communicating, is the best thing you can possibly ask for. And so for music, if the communication is great and you're firing on all cylinders musically, you walk on stage and you connect with everybody out in the crowd, that's winning, man. It doesn't matter how many tickets you're selling or how many records you're selling or singles you're selling and streaming. If you connect with one person and they're so inspired, to me, that's what it's all about. And I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's what I try everywhere we go. It's really important for me to feel like you have a connection with either somebody in the crowd or somebody with the other bands or some of the booking agents that you meet, in Kansas City, whatever, so.
Well, speaking of connection, I can't help but notice that we're wearing the same glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. How did that happen?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a bigger story, but we've got Leon from Brookside Optical to thank for that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I saw you, when we pulled into the show, and I said, I need those glasses. I'm a huge Purple fan. They're so eccentric and cool and unique. They have this sense of identity that I'd never seen before. So I was asking you about them. You told me about Leon. You said you may be able to come out to the show. And we spent hours the next day at Brookside Optical looking at all sorts of different glasses that he might be able to put together that would help me sort of accentuate my identity and personality. But it always came back to these glasses. And so not only did you make the referral, but you actually gave me your glasses. You had Leon pop the lenses out, put new lenses in for me that he had adjusted, and got you some new ones. So I'm glad that you were able to get some new frames later on. But I love those. And that connection was great. He was a really remarkable human being that took an afternoon off and on a Sunday to spend some time with us. And it had you and I not even said more than 2 or 3 words to each other, I wouldn't be wearing these phenomenal glasses or feel a lot better about moving into the time where I actually need them without, I'd be wearing some boring frames.
Well, and part of my favorite part about the story is because I left, and came back, and you had like a gazillion people on Facebook Live helping you pick out your glasses.
Yeah.
All over the world, they're helping you decide what your next look was going to be.
And then to go one step farther, when I travel all over the world after that, go over to Europe, and this girl from Germany shows up in London, says, "Where are the glasses?" And I didn't have them on, so I had to get them out. Now that's become a topic of conversation because she was one of the ones that actually helped chime in. Everybody was unanimous. It was a big unanimous decision that these were the glasses that were me. Yeah. But yeah, I love that. That is the beautiful connection about music and social media. If there's anything to be gained with social media, right? It's the social aspect, the community that you can develop. It really, it exponentially helps extend your reach with music, right? So that's another thing about a Flock of Seagulls, right? The music has been around for 35 years plus, and it's touched a lot of people. And I feel so fortunate to be a newbie in the band. I knew the music, and I was roller skating to it when I was a young teenager, right? But how blessed am I that not only do I get the memories of all those things, but they become my friends and my family, and I get to play these songs every night. How cool is that? I'm fortunate.
Yeah, that concert was fun to see how much just the Flock of Seagulls took everybody in the crowd back to, that time when they first heard those songs, and just everybody was so nostalgic about it that night. It was a cool event.
The generation is really important, right? Because in that time, the early 80s, life was so different for everybody. And the people that come to the shows think about how their life was when they were 12 to 20, right? And life was simpler. They didn't have the responsibilities, the jobs, the whatever, financial issues, any of those things. There were at that point, politics didn't matter. There was no real thought about like how difficult the world was. Music let you escape, right? So when you go to these shows and you think about that time, you can close your eyes. You can put yourself right back at the time when you were making out with your girlfriend in the back of the car at 16 and the song was playing on the radio. You can go there for like an hour and all those things that are happening in the world don't work, right? So it's almost cheating, right? So we get up there, we have a great time playing these songs, but they get to come out and go back to this point in their life where it was easier, more fun, and it's like Disneyland every night.
Yeah, for sure. Well, man, we're past your time where you got to go. Can I ask you one more question?
Of course, absolutely.
If you think back to 16-year-old Kevin and just think about what advice you would give him today, if you could give him any advice that might help him, in his journey.
Well, I gave that advice to my 16-year-old Caleb a lot of times and my 18-year-old Nolan when they're venturing into this world. I would say there are a couple of things. I touched on the effect you have on others being a really important thing. Make sure that when you talk to somebody, you look them in the eye, you shake their hand, you smile, and you listen to them. It's a really important thing to make that connection in whatever business you're in, right? So if you're an accountant and you're talking to somebody else about their financial issues, they want to know and be able to trust, and trust comes from listening and having that direct communication. So I think really trying to connect with somebody beyond just a superficial sort of introduction is key and important. In the music business, one thing that I really think I wished I had spent more time on developing the skills that are required to be financially sustainable in the business. I'm blessed that I have a career that I can bring my laptop and I can do web design for my clients while we're on an airplane somewhere going to a gig. And then I roll on stage and I do, well musically. But at the end of the day, Mike wrote these songs and he justifiably gets the big paycheck, right? And since I didn't write lyrics, melody, I was in songwriting and working on the publishing end of these things, there's no residual money, right? It's if we don't play a gig, there's no mailbox money for me. If I had really worked on my craft to develop understanding of publishing and songwriting and licensing and those kinds of things, I think it would have been financially more sustainable. At the end of the day, for me, if it was all about that and it was work, it wouldn't be as fun for me. I love the fact that it doesn't feel like a job. I can still hang on to the beauty of walking on stage and traveling in a van or being on the bus or being on a plane and really enjoying every bit that we do, even if it's a long drive overnight and you're not getting any sleep. Walking on stage erases all that stuff. I still have some of that magic, but I think if I were to be able to transport back to 16-year-old Kevin, I would have figured out ways that I could still have residual income coming in so that it makes for more time for enjoyment when we're not on the road. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Man, Kevin, I've had a ball here. I know we could spend another half hour here easily.
Anytime.
We'll have to do it again.
I would love to. Absolutely. Well, I hope to get back and we'll hang in Kansas City because your Chiefs are playing Super Bowl tomorrow.
Oh, man, we got a big day coming up.
Yeah. Do you have predictions?
Chiefs.
Score?
I don't get that far into that. I don't care if it's 1 point or 20, but it would be a lot less stressful if it was 20.
I'm sure.
Right. It's gonna be a good game.
That city or that whole community is so big into football, and it's fun to see. I bet you the area is just going to be on fire tomorrow. So I wish I could be there to join you, watch.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I'll be with my son who's a 49ers fan. So yeah. But either way, it'll be a good game. I love hearing from you, man. Chad, it's great to see you do this because I think spreading the information about people dreaming big and going after this thing, it's important, especially those young kids that are trying to do it,
Right on. Thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely. Good talking to you.
Have a great
day. Take care.
What a pleasure this was to have Kevin on the Dream Big series. He is always so gracious with his time. I would love it if you would support Kevin at the links in the show notes below. Please let him know how much you appreciate him sharing his life and his experiences with you by either commenting on his links or commenting even on this podcast as well. You've been listening to the Dream Big series. We would love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to visit us at dreambigseries.com for more podcasts, videos, and blogs. Also, let us know if you would like to bring the Dream Big series event to your school, corporation, or organization. Thank you for listening to the Dream Big series.